All right, welcome everyone. Come on in. When you come in, have a seat, especially we'd love to have you come sit up here in the front. I want to welcome you to the kickoff and keynote reception of our second annual Berkeley Public Policy Conference and Alumni Gathering here at the Goldman School of Public Policy. This is a really important and critical time, not just in our country's history, but in our university's history, in the planet's history, and we are constantly at the Goldman School thinking about how to be present in the moment and find opportunities for change. And so I want you to imagine for a moment being the leading intellectual home for solving the world's most intractable public problems. Imagine what it takes to do that well. And the reason why we want to do it is because we want to have long-term societal benefit. We want to have real impact. This is the value and the mission of the University of California, Berkeley. And the Goldman School, School of Public Policy, has a role to play, a vital role to play in this, in that this school, this university, was created by public policy. It tried to solve a long-term, intractable, and societal problem. This conference is the opportunity that we have to continue investing in that mission. For the next day and a half, we shut down the Goldman School, and we come together to share ideas, to re-energize one another, recommit ourselves to our public mission, and sustain our value of being the #1 school of public policy in the world. #1. Another thing we need to do to be the leading intellectual home for solving the toughest problems is to innovate and make sure we have a keen awareness of what we need to do to change. And one of the big changes is the Goldman School is now the official graduate school home of development practice at the University of California, Berkeley, with the adoption of our Masters of Development Practice degree program. We do care deeply about ensuring that we have policies and systems and institutions that have long-term societal benefit, but also that do not deplete our planet's resources. And those working in public policy, and especially in development practice, they're seeking to find these solutions to those big problems that are really impacting individuals, economies, and climate around the world. We seek to improve agriculture, education, governance, human rights, communication, technology, safety and security, and humanitarian relief. So the timing of this conference and the timing of that degree program are vital to us making sure we can realize this idea of being the leading intellectual home for problem solving. And then finally, we need to learn from one another. And so this event, this kickoff event, is a way that we can start by bringing in some of the best and brightest minds that are from the Goldman community, that are really having the impact that we seek to continue to have in the world today. And so I'm pleased to welcome Chief Sustainability Officer at Amazon and Goldman MPP, 1998, graduate Kara Hurst, as our keynote speaker this evening. Not yet. Woo! Welcome, Kara. Kara leads the worldwide teams at Amazon working on environmental, sustainability, and social responsibility across the country. She joined Amazon in 2014 to build a sustainability roadmap, and bless you, here you are, front and center. And now oversees the company's evolution toward more sustainable operations, transportation, products, packaging, as well as efforts around water stewardship and reduced waste. Under her leadership, Amazon announced its commitment to the net zero carbon by 2040 and co-founded the Climate Pledge, which now has over 500 signatories. And in 2023, you were named one of the 100 most influential climate leaders in business by Time Magazine. That's a big deal. Very good. Goldman. Prior to Amazon, you were a CEO. That's pretty powerful, of the Sustainability Consortium, a multi-sector group across academia, the retail industry, and the public sector. And that was named one of Scientific America's top 10 world-changing ideas. You are constantly pushing the boundaries. That's really powerful. And just in general, on behalf of the Goldman School and our entire Berkeley community, welcome back to Berkeley, and we're happy to have you here with us tonight. Come up on stage. All right.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So let's just hit it just right from the top here. Just talk about your career and talk about how Goldman kind of prepared you and didn't prepare you for what you were going to kind of experience, and share with the audience your story.
Sure. Well, it's so fun to be back at Goldman. It's definitely changed a lot. We were just talking about that. When I was here in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, I think there were 30 to 40 folks in my class.
Mm-hmm. Do you see anybody?
No, I had lunch with one of them today, which was really fun to catch up. We were a really tight group, and I think all of us chose what at the time was a leading program, still is a leading program, because we really believed in the power of, one, the public sector, of policy as a lever for change, but we were seeking out also, I think, a program and a space where collaboration and public-private partnerships and thinking holistically and thinking about systems change was embraced. And so we were, I know, pushing on our professors at the time to, encourage us to think interdisciplinary. And I considered a number of different options right before I had, I did my undergrad, and then I worked for 3 years at the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C., most of that in a basement on a large mainframe programming SAS.
Oh, fun.
That's before Windows for all of you. We're way
DOS.
too young to understand that comment. And I did huge volumes of studies for HUD, and I led large things. And I kind of watched in that think tank environment. I watched all that research we produced get, it was so good, and we learned so much, and then I watched it sit on a shelf. And a lot of the folks I worked for were economists, and they really wanted me to go get a PhD in economics or something like that. I toyed with a law degree, and none of that felt right, because I felt like, I don't want to do stuff that's going to sit on a shelf. I wasn't sure I wanted to think like a lawyer. I don't know, I maybe wanted to get an MBA. I didn't know. And I found this MPP degree, and I thought that fits. And I had worked for Senator Moynihan in New York, and I loved politics. And I just was really attracted to this idea that we could be interdisciplinary. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of us who came here were searching for that. So Goldman was a place that was pushing those boundaries and prepared us very well. I felt like a couple of different things I took away were, one, to create that toolbox, kept that concept of adding things to your toolbox and building on a toolbox and preparing you throughout your career to not think about the role, the title, the position, the field necessarily, but what tools are you learning? Who are you working with, and how do they think? And are they increasing your capability and your capacity to think strategically? Are they pushing your intellectual capability and your capacity? Are they giving you new tools? Are they giving you new levers? And are you able to make decisions without full information? That was a key thing I took away. We had some exercise where we had to calculate the value of a fish. Do you still do that? Yeah, I don't know. It was fascinating. And, and everybody was all, I think we had to do it in 24 hours or something. We stayed up all night. And that was fascinating to me because everybody freaked out, like, we don't have all the information. They're like, that's the point. And I really, I loved all of that. So I think all that preparation was really good preparation for the rest of my career, where I have constantly been in situations where I absolutely don't have all the information I need, and I have to make very big, increasingly in my role, certainly at Amazon, very impactful, very big decisions without full information, but with a lot of data, both quantitative and qualitative, and combine those two things. The one thing you asked about what it, at the time, I wanted to do a joint MPP MBA, and it was not a thing. And I was not allowed to do that. And I pushed and pushed and pushed at Berkeley to do it, and they said no. And I did, and I went and took classes at the law school, and I went and took classes at the business school, but I was not allowed to do a joint degree. So now I hear we have that, which is good.
That's good. So this was really good. So you had a really transformational academic experience, and I'm curious about the transformational cultural experience. Like, what role did the Berkeley kind of ethos and culture play in you thinking about problem solving and justice and really trying to make a difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there were professors from all sorts of interdisciplinary backgrounds. Honestly, it was the first time I had ever taken economics. Somehow I escaped that in my undergraduate career. Somehow. I did my undergraduate at Columbia University, Barnard College, and I don't know how. I didn't have to take economics. I somehow tested out of it or something and then proceeded to almost fail it here. And then I was a TA for statistics here, which I loved. I don't know. I mean, it was kind of a wild ride, and I felt like it just Berkeley encouraged a lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
I took a night class over at Hurst on marketing, and I met people who were working. Actually, somebody who became someone I connected with throughout my career. He was working at the Gap, and he was working in sustainability. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't think that was where I was going. I actually did my focus area in child and family policy. But that was somebody I was like, that's it was just an exposure to, I think, a lot of different fields and careers and ways of thinking. It was the first time I'd really thought about budgeting and got exposed to OMB and things like that.
It's like a marketplace of learning.
Yeah.
Really cool. So how do you think about public policy when it comes to shaping a sustainability agenda?
A lot of my time in my current role as the Chief Sustainability Officer is actually spent with our public policy teams and colleagues. And
you all have a public policy team?
I do have
cool.
we have 3 different dedicated public policy teams to sustainability, which is quite unusual and I think a real privilege. There are teams, and they're focused geographically, so international public policy teams, North American teams, and then teams focused on specific business units. And the reason we have that is because we believe, and I've driven this, that policy is part of how we need to have our influence in the world. And I'll give you a few examples of that. So we at Amazon, one of the things that we've been working a lot on is renewable and carbon-free energy. And we, for the last 4 years, have been the largest purchaser of renewable energy in the world. We have a massive portfolio of renewable energy, and we announced this year, actually, we had, I'm going to go into some detail here, but just to give you context. When we set the climate pledge, which is our goal in 2019, we set the climate pledge to be a net zero carbon by 2040. It's a very ambitious goal for a company of our size, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And at the time when we announced that, we also announced our ambition to be 100% renewable across our global operations by 2030, which is a lot of investment. It's kind of a big kind of demand signal to wind and solar industries at the time that we were going to invest quite a bit. We then took a look at that a couple years later. And by the way, in 2019, we announced this in the fall of 2019. So then the pandemic hit, supply chain crisis hit, lots of things happened. But we took a look at that and we said, actually, we think we can go a little faster. We moved the goal up to 2025. We announced this year that we hit that in 2023, 7 years ahead. So, thank you.
Your leadership.
So we are moving at pace, at scale. When we want to move fast, we move really fast. We have that is steel in the ground. We have over 500 projects. I think the latest figure is something around, just to give you a sense of the scale, if you're an energy person, it's over 30 gigawatts of energy. And we've also done a nuclear project because we know with what's coming, we're going to have to do carbon free and we're going to have to expand. But the grid infrastructure in this country is not where it needs to be. And we can't do anything about that in the private sector. That is a public infrastructure issue. So in addition to what we can do, which is spend private sector money building and encouraging and sending demand signals. And by the way, also participating in things like the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance and teaching others how to do renewable projects and promoting this at scale and bringing others in. We can do all of these things with the capital that we have. We can deploy that capital. We can move at scale. We can go fast. We can say, we think this is a thing, right? We think renewable, when I set my very first goal in this, which was we said, 50 solar rooftops, because we have our own, facilities around the world. I mean, my leadership was like, as we said, 50 solar rooftops by 2020. My leadership was like, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. And we did that. We can use our own buildings, we can use our own capital, but I can't do anything about the grid infrastructure. I really can't. That's a public sector problem. But what we can do is we can work with our policy colleagues to go and talk to lawmakers and regulators and folks on the Hill and say, we're in this. We need transformation. We need policy change. We need you to understand what this is doing to our economy. We need to see change. And sometimes it's educating them about the issue. It's bringing them into conversation. It's, what does this mean, grid infrastructure? And what does it mean that our transmission lines are old? And what does this mean to invest in this? And why is that an issue? And so it's, it's starting from the basics. But these folks are elected on a whole host of issues, and maybe that's not their issue, but they're now responsible, or they come from a state where it's important. And I think policy is absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. And you have to work across so many different issues and be able to speak to why policy is a critical component of a public-private partnership or a capital investment. And I'm not somebody who was obviously trained up in a business environment, but I have to be able to speak all of those languages. Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking to legislators, is it the policy team that's doing a lot of that educating about what the issues are? Is it their staff reaching out to try and find middle ground? How do you get that common understanding around not just the problem, but the solutions through a policy framework?
It can be a whole host of things. Sometimes they'll have somebody on staff who's, a deep expert in this, and sometimes they're new to it. So it depends on, sometimes the type of, elected official you're talking to. If it's a mayor, they're going to have a different type of staff than a congressperson, than a senator, than a, Secretary of Energy. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like amazing leadership, really moving fast. And so can you tell us a little bit about the start or the genesis of how you got connected to Amazon and why this was so important to them, and why you kind of moved away from what you were doing to something like this in probably a challenging environment?
Yeah, I mean, I had never worked in a corporation before I joined Amazon in 2014. So go big or go home. Yeah, go big. Up until then, I had worked in nonprofits, and I'd worked for a senator, worked for Mayor Willie Brown here in San Francisco, and I had worked in sort of public-private partnerships. Mm-hmm. I also worked for an organization called BSR, Business for Social Responsibility, for 11 years. We have an alum or a fan. And I had worked kind of in and around, a lot of this, really what at the time was sustainability, but, people always, it's funny when the young people that join our organization now and they say, oh, did you get your degree in sustainability? I always laugh, like there wasn't such a thing. So my career, when I started, at the Urban Institute, I worked actually on housing and economic development issues, and that was a passion of mine. And even in college, I worked for a group called Homes for the Homeless. I was always interested in housing issues, and I was interested in economic inequality and fairness and justice, and that was kind of what I really was rooted in, and community organizing, that kind of stuff. And then I worked for elected officials, and then I worked down in Silicon Valley, and I was the ED. I worked kind of for the Children's Health Council, and then I worked for one of the first, actually, public-private ventures to work on the digital divide, kind of Silicon Valley 1.0 stuff.
So Open Voice?
Open Voice, yeah. It was, I don't know if this is going way back, but in the 90s, there's a group called Plugged In, which is the first kind of again, I'm really dating myself, but we used to have to go to places that had computers. So community centers had computers. People would go there to use computers. And you know, we built out AOL's Teen Channel. Just to really date myself there.
What's AOL?
Yeah. So I ran a public-private partnership where we hired teens in East Palo Alto, and we were paid to build out AOL's Teen Channel. So I hired, you know, basically underprivileged youth and got AOL to pay us to build out their teen channel. That's what I did, which was pretty cool. And I worked out of a chop shop in East Palo Alto for several years. No joke.
You're a soldier. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And also my original office got taken over by eminent domain. Yes. Which is now where the Four Seasons sits in East Palo Alto. Yep. So it was a barber shop and a chop shop, and it got taken over by eminent domain, and then we moved into a garage that was a chop shop. So that was fun times. And, you know, I mean, I liked that kind of community organizing. I liked all that kind of nonprofit work. And then I moved, I really got, and I worked for, you know, Sun Microsystems and a bunch of other companies trying to get them to hire these kids. And it was really fun to see kids whose parents hadn't gone to college and had no access to this booming tech economy that was happening in the 90s in Silicon Valley. And we were teaching them how to code. We were teaching them how to use Adobe. We were teaching them how to to build out stuff and getting startups to hire them and having them make that leapfrog where they were making money and they were learning tech skills. And their parents sometimes, were non-English speaking and were in the service economy. And we were saying, let's take this next generation and let's give you access to, these tech jobs. So I was really passionate about that, but I was also seeing how small it was, and I was really interested in scale. And I was wondering, whether or not working with the corporations directly would be more effective. And so I found BSR, and BSR was about, working with these corporations around some of these issues. And at the time, it was sort of, a lot of the supply chain issues with Nike, and it was, WorldCom hadn't happened yet, and some of these other supply chain issues. And I started to think about, a lot of the corporate sustainability, or that wasn't even a word, but corporate responsibility work was a lot about philanthropy. And the way I started to think about it was like, it shouldn't be about what you do with the money that you make, but how you made it in the first place. How are you treating your workers? How are your supply chains? What are the factories like where you make, where you're producing your goods? And BSR was doing a lot of work in that space. And so I went in and I built their tech practice and their pharmaceutical practice, and I built a bunch of different things and got to really learn about sustainability and corporate responsibility. And I stayed there for a long time, and then I ran the Sustainability Consortium, and that's when Amazon called and said, do you want to be our chief scientist? And I said, I'm not a scientist, but let's talk about some things.
Go big or go home, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were looking at the problem wrong, and so I said, I really think Amazon, I'm a customer, I love the company, I love e-commerce. I think e-commerce has the possibility to change consumption in the world. I think Amazon could change the way people think about product. Mm-hmm. And I'm a sustainability person, and you guys are super late to the game. You don't have anything. So I'm glad you want to do something, but you're doing it all wrong. Like, here's how I would do it. Go do it this way. And I was like, thanks very much. And then I didn't hear from them for a month, and they called me back and said, like, you want to talk more about how you're talking about it. And so we sort of started a conversation.
Very cool. They wanted you pretty badly.
Well, I think we had a conversation. It's a curious company. I love the intellectual curiosity of the company. I love the openness to ideas. I love the ability to challenge. Super data driven. We are incredibly data science, analytical driven, but we're also anecdotally driven. It's a real balance. And again, that goes back to GSPP training. Like, you have to have the data, the science. You have to be able to be highly, I use math every day at Amazon. That's probably not a lot of, people who will.
Can you say that again? We have some first-year students. What do you say you do every day at Amazon?
I use my math.
Okay.
But you also have to bring in, we're customer obsessed, and you have to bring in the customer, and you have to bring in the anecdotal information. You have to be able to balance all of that and take a very holistic view. And, I feel like I have good training in that area.
Very cool. We have postcards and the like, either going around or nearby. If you've got questions, make sure you hand them to one of our staff, and I'll make sure that we try and get to them during this time. You've mentioned a few things, but what do you see as the most pressing challenges when it comes to fighting climate change through policy? And we were talking about COP earlier and some other ones, but what are the real big ones? And as a school, we're always thinking about what's next. How can we contribute? Maybe help us orient GSPP to something that we can do to be a part of the solutions.
Sure. I think it's an exciting time, really exciting time to think about, sustainability and climate and policy. And I use sustainability broadly because in my group at Amazon, we have not only climate issues and carbon issues, but we have water and waste and biodiversity. I also have human rights and social responsibility. So we really look at a very broad remit across the environmental and social agenda. And I think for all of that, there are so many things, no matter your policy interests, that are emerging now as critical issues for certainly the private sector, but also public-private partnerships. And for policy, there's a couple of different things I would point to. One is we have right now a moment in time where there is a tremendous amount of legislation that we're looking at, particularly coming out of Europe, that is going to really change how the companies are disclosing, the volume of information that's out there, and what the kind of metrics and disclosure look like. And some of that's going to be good. Some of it is going to be useful. Some of it, may not be. But I think what it's going to do is it's going to level the playing field for everybody. We're really excited about it in some ways, that it's just going to say, these are the metrics. And so we can stop kind of, arguing over what they should be and drive towards like one set of metrics, hopefully, that will be standardized. And then, we can kind of move on from that debate. And I think that's going to be really interesting when that gets kind of just standardized. We've been talking about that for a very long time. I think that is now here and coming, and that's going to have a lot of policy implications. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing in the states, though, is still a little bit of like states popping up with different things. And you saw California pop up with their own thing, and then now they're kind of undoing it. And so I think are changing what they've done. So I think we're still a little bit wobbly maybe here, but what we're seeing out of Europe is, I think, going to be the standardization. So we're watching all of that, but a lot of the policy work is going to be around in that area. I think there's a lot of policy work on things like deployment of capital. So when you think about the impact that the IRA had, the Investment Reduction Act, and the infra bills, that has been incredible, and that's a game changer. And the capital that's been deployed as a result of that massive federal legislation has been really impactful. And so I think one of the next steps is going to be continuously, how do we deploy that capital faster? Are we deploying it in the right ways? What is the impact of that? That's been a game changer for some of the technologies that we know are solves to the biggest things that we need, but aren't at scale quick enough. So carbon sequestration, carbon capture type technologies, newer things that are untested but that need scale and need investment. I think those are interesting areas to explore. We don't know enough. We need more investment in clean tech and climate tech. We need bigger solves. That's going to be really interesting. And then the infrastructure pieces I've already talked about. I mean, we just need, we are one of the largest transportation logistics networks in the world. Again, we've made some big bets, right? We when we announced the pledge, we also announced the largest ever order for electric delivery vans. We placed that order with a company called Rivian for 100,000 electric delivery vans. We work with multiple different companies. Right now, we have over 24,000 electric delivery vehicles on the road already. We have built the largest private charging infrastructure network of anybody. So we are doing this at scale because we have scale and we can do that, and we've decided to invest. But we're one company. So, that's great. I think that I've got, this leadership that has bought in and investing and doing all that. It would be amazing if every company did that or could do that. But really the governments and the policies to incent that, and if we can get governments moving to do that. And we've had some great public-private partnerships. We've got, through the pledge, we did a partnership with a group called C40 that some of you may know. It's a group of leading mayors around the world, almost 100 mayors. We went to them and said, we think that public-private partnerships are key to this. Would you partner with the Climate Pledge, which again is a group of 525 companies that have signed on to this pledge with us? And they said, well, we don't, there was some back and forth about working with the private sector, but they agreed to. We now have, in Latin America and in India, we've got 6 cities in Latin America and 4 in India, where C40 is now working with us. The mayors of those cities, places like Bogota and Lima and Bengaluru, they're working with us now to change the infrastructure of those cities to promote electrification. It has to be public-private partnerships working together. So we're doing this globally, and we're trying to work with local folks. We're trying to work with the mayors. We're trying to work where we have operations. And that has to, that's all policy work, really.
I'm curious, because you almost sound like an MBA, right? That's not what you're doing. You're change-making. And I'm curious about what corporations think about public policy schools. We know what they think about business schools, but are they even thinking about policy schools or schools of public affairs that can help bridge this idea of delivering services in ways that are sustainable and then using public policy to ensure that they meet whatever kind of bigger goals they have in the area or in the space? So are you a unicorn here, and we need to take this model and expand it out so that more corporations can identify leaders to do what you're doing? Or is there something else that a school of public policy, I mean, we can influence other schools of public policy. If this works, maybe we build something around it.
I don't think that right now anybody can afford to speak one language. I don't think that if you're in policy school, you should really, you have to understand the language of business, much like business folks have to understand the language of policy. And frankly, we should all understand the language of public health, right? I mean, because when I go out to certain audiences, I don't even want to say the word sustainability. I just want to say, the environmental justice aspects of what we're doing. When we deploy those electric vehicles, I have a team looking at that saying, by the way, I want to deploy them first in the communities where the asthma rates are highest, and I want my science team studying that and making sure that air gets cleaner fastest in the places where the people are most affected by pollution. Wouldn't that be amazing, right? Let's do that. So, I think that, our teams are constantly trying to think in that way and integrate environmental justice with the science, with the policy, with what can we do as a business, because we have scale and we have capital and we have ability to go. So I like interdisciplinary systems level thinking. And I don't care if you come at it with a policy degree. I have people on my team. I have people on my team who have degrees in literature. That people come at it from all kinds of disciplines. It doesn't matter as long as you can look at this systemically and holistically and think about these solutions in a way, because we don't have time. We don't have time. This is a decisive decade. The world is burning. And we have to get at this now. We have the ability, we have the solutions. We know how to do this. We have to have the willingness. And we have companies like the one I work at and the many, many others that have committed to this. we are not doing it perfectly because we've never done this before. We don't know all of what we're doing. And there are critics who are coming at us all the time, and that is fine because we can learn from that, but we can't stop. We can't be stopped by that because we're not doing it perfectly. So you have to be brave, you have to speak multiple languages, and you have to keep going. And so I think that, you know, part of what, I don't think I'm a unicorn, but I do think that I've learned to speak through my career. I've learned to speak the language of NGOs, and I've learned to certainly speak the language of policies through my training, and then I have learned now the private sector.
Very cool. On the keeping going theme, how do you stay grounded in your work and rooted in real life impact in local communities? This is a question from the audience. You have 2 teenagers. That's how you stay grounded. Like, Mom, you're not as cool as you think you are.
They ground you real fast.
Yeah, you're at a large company, and so you probably work quite a bit. You travel a lot. You're dealing with people that may have different values. Is there something that you do individually to try and keep yourself oriented? Do you have a yoga mat in your office? Do you have Peloton in your closet? Like something.
I love that you think I exercise. It's
well,
really not really. It's not really it, but
you have 2 teenagers.
I have a wonderful family. My daughter's a sophomore in college. My son's a junior in high school, and and they're an amazing, supportive husband. And I do think having folks around you, and I have an awesome team. Also, over the 10 years I've been at Amazon, I've had the privilege and the luxury of being able to hire, I think, some of the best talent in the world. And I mean that sincerely. And they're people not only that I think are brilliant and talented, but I really like them as human beings. And I spend a lot of time at work, and they do too. And I think you have to really hire people that have integrity and that you want to be around, because we travel a lot together, we work really, really hard, and we have a lot of fun. And this work is hard and it's exhausting, and I think we pour a lot of ourselves into it. And so that's one of the keys. We've been through a lot in the last few years, as of all of you, when the world's been through a lot. And I think this work in front of us is daunting. Yeah. And so, you want to find people who are solutions-oriented and can help you stay optimistic, too.
Cool. So another question from the audience. How are you able to get buy-in for your most controversial policy ideas?
I think that, you bring the data and the science, number one. So, it's that old adage that people are entitled to their own opinions, not their own facts. And I think we have a lot of fantastic mechanisms at Amazon. I am definitely a huge fan of the way that we work. I have learned a tremendous amount. I've become a better writer. I've become really a big fan of what we call our mechanisms. We have specific ways of writing, but also things like what we call a working backwards document, or some of the ways that we present information. And we have tenets that we write. We have an adage that says, every time we write tenets, we have something we add that says, unless you know better. We invite very healthy debate. And I don't know how many of you know how Amazon operates, but we run our meetings where their PowerPoint is banned. We write 6-page documents, and we start every single meeting with a silent half-hour read. And so we read a very deep document that has been written in a very specific way that usually has a very long appendix. 6 pages is a little bit of a myth. And that gets everybody level set on the same data and the same set of information, and then we discuss for an hour. So 90 minutes is the meeting with a deep half-hour read at the beginning. And it really is it's a different way of operating, and I probably run through 6 or 7 of those documents in a day. So it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing, and it's a lot of data. And when you have that mechanism going, you have really good discussions. And everybody is trained up in that at our company. And so when you have a controversial idea, we have a mechanism called a hotly debated topic, and there's a way to present the HDT, and you present the pros and the cons of the HDT, and we have a mechanism and a way of debating that, and we get into it. We get into very good debates, and anyone in the room, regardless of level, is invited to the HDT to say what they think, and you have the debate, and then we have a leadership principle called disagree and commit. And we make the decision, and if you disagree, but you commit. So we have a lot of ways of operating that are very clear.
Erica Weisinger. Is Erica here?
I'm going to tell her everything.
We have so Goldman has a constructive dialogue initiative where we've been working towards these principles of constructive dialogue to try and really get to common understanding. And this hot debated topic, this HDT, I love just saying HDT. It makes it sound like there's something that's going to explode or something, but it's not. And the principles of that, I'm sure we can read up on it, but yes, Annie, please, let's make sure we let Erica know. This is great. What other policy areas you and Amazon anticipate focusing on for greatest impact over the next 5 years? Just maybe one or two.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of focus on carbon, so much focus on carbon. I mean, carbon is one thing. Important, but, it's one number. And, the world there's a lot of different things that are going to, have an impact on the world. And I think increasingly water scarcity and water risk is something the teams are really looking at. Especially, if you, talk to folks who live in Arizona or in Delhi, they're focused on water. So that's an area we've been studying. We have been working on incredibly hard. I'm personally passionate about it. I sit on the board of water.org. I've taken trips to India. I just went to Indonesia in June. I brought my 16-year-old on that one. We went and visited villages and saw some of the projects that we've been deploying. I think water is going to be a huge issue going forward in the world. If you don't have access to clean water and sanitation, it is a basic human rights health issue for people. And so that we've made a commitment to be water positive by 2030, particularly for our AWS business, and we're 41% of the way to that goal, which means we're going to return clean water to the communities where we operate, more clean water than we utilize by 2030. So things like that are important, and we've invested $10 million into water.org, and we've done other things like that to help folks around the world have access to clean water. So I think that's a huge issue. Biodiversity is a huge issue. Looking at agricultural commodity supply chains and looking at we own Whole Foods, and so we have products we need to look at, and we need to look at how they're sourced, and we need to look at how we're sourcing different types of these kinds of things we put in our stores and where they're coming from, and then the impact on forests. And that also includes, packaging is a much, much smaller percentage of our footprint, but it's important to our customers. People get it on their doorstep every single day. We just took out, 95% of the air pillows, the plastic air pillows in the United States. You guys shouldn't be seeing those anymore. So yeah.
It's like paper now.
Yeah, it's all paper. Yeah, I think we're actually, we hit 95% in June. I think we're already up to 99%. So we've taken the plastic out. That was a big initiative of our team. And so I think things like that, we're biodiversity, water, and then for me, I think, again, thinking systemically, I'm really passionate about the nexus between gender equity and climate. There's a huge amount of investment going into climate tech. Women-led climate tech is seeing none of that. And so we started a climate gender equity fund. We put $52 million into it. We did this with USAID, again, public-private partnerships. We invited other companies into that. We did this with Administrator Power, Samantha Power, who's amazing. And they're raising funds. We got other companies to come and give money to that. And we made our first 3 grants to 3 women-led incubators in Africa last year, and these women are doing amazing things with climate tech and deploying that capital. And so you have to invest in women, and you have to deploy capital, where it's not being seen, but women are leading on climate tech all over the world. So that nexus of climate, gender, equity, and climate is going to be really important as well. So those are a couple areas I'd call it.
I just hate, this sounds like a fun job and in a really important area. So it's really inspiring to me just to kind of hear how there are actions that you can do to help solve the problems. Just simple things, well, I don't know how simple they are in my mind. Just don't use plastic anymore, use paper.
Not so simple.
It's not so simple, but I mean, you make it sound easy, but I know it's not. But it's really the hard work of what we say the hard work of democracy is. You have a lot of GSPP students and other graduate students here in the audience tonight. Any words of advice for those who are interested in following your footsteps? We haven't heard any of the hard stuff.
Everything I'm saying is really hard to do.
I know, but you didn't describe it as hard. I don't.
Really hard to do.
Say, I lost a finger or anything like that. It's kind of like, but.
We have a great safety record. For the record.
You did say metrics. Great metrics, yeah. But anybody who wants to follow in your footsteps, they're going to look at you and say, I want to do that. Maybe share a little bit about what the bumpy parts are and maybe the reward. So the risk and reward kind of conversation.
Yeah, look, all the time, and I said this recently in another interview, I mean, I want to see my teams failing. If we have, all sorts of goals, and we rank our goals red, yellow, green, and I do a monthly review of goals with all my leaders. If all their goals are green, we're not trying hard enough, right? So I really want to see people failing. I really want to see us pushing the envelope. I really want to see us stretching. And it's okay to fail. We really want to be stretching. We want to be out there. We want to be seeing what else we can do. We try things all the time that don't work. We try to go as fast as we can, every year to deploy more things, to push into new areas, to figure some things out. Like I said, we all feel like very passionate. People who work on sustainability choose this career because they're very passionate about the area. They want to be making change. They feel like, this is one way to do it. So, everybody's pushing really, really hard. And we work in a business where this is a priority among many, right? And we're not always going to be the top of the pile for the investment decision. I have to compete for investment like everybody else at the company. And we've had years where we've had, to make reductions in our business. We've had to make other investment decisions. We've had to pull back on things that I hoped we would do. I've had to tell people we're going to cut initiatives. We've had to, try to figure out how to get companies to think about sustainability when there's a global pandemic going on. I launched a pledge, and 6 months later, pandemic hit and everybody went home. And it was like, well, we just launched this massive initiative, and I've got to go around talking to CEOs, telling them, make a commitment to 2040. This is really difficult to do because a lot of people, are nervous about how much they should be investing, how to invest, are the solutions really there, do they need to go that fast, can they be just, maybe is 2050 sound safer? What does the science really say? I mean, there's, for every published article that will tell you one thing, you can find another that's going to tell you something else. So I think that one of the most challenging things is to stay the course and to find the signal amongst all the noise. There is a lot of noise, and if our heads were on a swivel every time someone told us that we're doing it wrong, or we should be doing something else, or the plan has changed, we wouldn't get anything done. And so I think for the GSPP folks, policy can be very fickle. And when you're crafting policy and you're working with a group to create consensus and collaboration, one of the things you need to do early on is to figure out your end game, right? We used to call it, I think we did this thing around a BATNA or whatever, right? It's like, what are you trying to accomplish? And you can get very distracted by a lot of data too. I have, sometimes teams like the collection of data is the thing, right? What are you going to do with that data? People will ask you for endless amounts of data. To what end? So you have to be very focused about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, what the impact of that information is going to bring you. Are you really going for the biggest possible thing you can go for? And then you have to have the discipline to stay the course. And that is probably the hardest thing to do, especially at the scale that I'm operating at.
Yeah. Well, you are certainly having a huge impact. And I can say we're extremely proud of you at the Goldman School. And so please thank Kara Hurst for coming and sharing with us. But we still have a few more questions, and I'm a survey researcher, and that means you have to ask deeply intriguing questions so that we can draw some of the things that are out. So I've got a series of questions, and this is like a lightning round.
Okay.
You don't have to get too deep, but they're not your traditional kinds of questions. So we'll start easy, and then we'll get a little bit more difficult. You game?
Go for it.
All right. So the first one, what is your desired climate change sustainability superpower?
If I could remain optimistic all the time,
What?
That would be great.
Would you have like a costume to go with that superpower? Like the big O on the thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great. What is the best climate change sustainability movie or documentary?
I mean, I love Don't Look Up. And
I love Don't Look Up.
I loved it because it was a populist. And it didn't hit you over the head with sustainability, but I'm also a huge sucker for anything David Attenborough.
Very good.
I mean, my family and I will just like watch the monkeys all, like anything he's talking, you just like, how can you not love his voice?
That's pretty cool. You win the Nobel Prize. Who introduces you?
Ooh. Probably my dad.
Oh. Say more about your dad. Unlightning round that.
Or my dad or my mom. But I mean, I just think, having my family there would be the most important to me.
Very cool. What was the last thing you honestly put 100% into?
Ooh. I mean, I don't know how to not do everything at like 1,000%. That's sort of my personality.
Like this interview right here? Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, I don't know. You probably get a flavor of how I go, so it's
100%. Yeah,
it's 100%.
This last one is easy then.
Okay.
But aside from family, who or what inspires you to keep going when you feel beaten down?
I mean, the first thing that pops in my head, honestly, is I just watched these athletes at the Paralympics. And, the Olympics is inspiring. I love all things sports. I'm a huge sports junkie. I grew up in Boston. And so, we didn't have seasons. We had like Celtics, Red Sox.
Roxbury, Dorchester.
Yeah. I mean, and I played sports in college. So I was a huge fan of the Olympics this year, and the Olympians are always inspiring, and I love all the little stories they produce. And then the Paralympians, to watch people who have gone through something in their life or have an impairment, and then are able to do these physical feats, I just find that absolutely incredible that people are unbounded by their own physical ability and their sort of, mental abilities and just go for it. I like people who just go for it.
Go for it.
just go for it.
I saw a Paralympian who was in archery and did the bullseye with their toe, and that was amazing. I felt like I need to step my game up. like that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people who just overcome what must be, you know, an incredible amount of, you know, just challenge and seemingly do incredible things. I was pretty inspired by that.
You do incredible things too. Thanks again for joining us tonight and being here. Yeah.